Everybody, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today I want to make a crankbait. Flat-sided, about 3 inches. It'll dive around 6 to 8 feet. So stick around. Alright, so the first thing we need to tackle is the question of material. What are we going to use to make this thing? If you've been watching this channel, you'll probably know that I'm not really too fussy about the wood I use. I just need wood that has a low enough density that I know will give me the buoyancy I need so that I can add some weight and still have that lure be nicely stable in the water. Today, we're going to get out there on the limb and do what I really love to do, which is work with wood that's really readily available, super cheap, not too fancy. This is a paint stirring stick, and it's got a couple of nice benefits. One, it's almost free. I think I bought 3 for like $1. 2, it has a dimension that is pretty rare to find, which is it's 1/4 inch thick and about 1.5 inches wide, and that makes for just about the right size for half of a lure blank. Just to give you the specs on this lure, it's going to be 3 inches long, about 1.25 inches deep from top to bottom. It'll end up being about 3/8 at its widest point. It'll be a floating crankbait, but it'll have a pretty gentle rise through the water. All you'll need is a compass and, of course, a straight edge. Start off with a horizontal line. And then we'll do a vertical line perpendicular to that horizontal line. This is lined paper, so it makes it a lot easier for me, so I'm just going to draw a perpendicular line. So you're going to draw a line 1 3/16 away from that first line you drew. And the idea here is we're just creating working lines. Then the next one is 1 7/16. And then on that first line you drew, you want to go from the horizontal up and put a little dot at 11/16 right there. On the next line over, you're going to go down 1 9/16. And you're going to make a third line measuring 2 11/16 from that first vertical line. And you'll measure down on that line from the center line 1 9/16. There's a lot of 16ths in this thing. Now we can actually draw the body. You want to set up a radius of 1 5/16, and you go to that first line, that first dot you made above it, and go from the center line down and around almost to the center line again. So the simplest way to set up for this next curve is to put your point in on that second line. On that dot you put in below the horizontal line, and then just tweak in your compass till it's touching the beginning of the lure. Take it all the way to the center line and just slightly beyond. And now you want to do the same sort of thing with this last dot on the final line that you drew. Adjust until you're tangent or just touching that bottom belly curve. Measure 3 inches, which is right here, and I'm going to draw a line across at about a 45. Now I have the shape that I want. Alright, so I need to set the angle for the bib, and I'm going to use my angle finder. This thing's pretty accurate, and I know that this surface here is level, and I'm just going to stick this on here until I get it right at 40, and I can set my bib angle with this. You could use a protractor and just draw in the line, but this works great for me. I'll now place the location of the eye because I'm going to need that, and I'm going to place the location for my rattle chamber because this is going to have a rattle. I'll use 5/32 for the eye, kind of small. But I think it'll look good. And I'm going to have a rattle chamber that's 5/8 of an inch in diameter. Now I've got it drawn. I'm just going to make like 10 copies of it on the copier. Alright, so I exaggerated. I only did 3 copies. But I'm going to use them to glue it on the wood so I can actually cut the wood out to the shape, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to cut 2 3.5-inch pieces of wood. Alright, so I need to glue these 2 pieces together now. And I'm going to use this Elmer's tape runner. And it's kind of like a really thin, crafty tape kind of thing. It's almost like contact cement on a roll, actually. And then I'm going to line these guys relatively well, I think, and give them a squeeze. Now, to put this template on here, I'm not going to bother cutting it out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spray the back with some Elmer's spray adhesive and just stick it on there and then trim away the excess. I've got it coated just over where the body of the lure is, and then it's just a matter of sticking your piece of wood here. The first thing I want to do is drill in those locations at the center of the eye and the center of my rattle chamber. This way, that little pilot hole will mark those locations for me throughout this process. Now, this thing's ready to go to the bandsaw and get cut out. So before I get too far along and get this carved out, we'll have to get a sample of the wood we're using to get the density. And then when you've taken that sample, you need to take measurements of the width, the length, and the thickness. So then you'll go ahead and calculate the volume, and then take a small gram scale and weigh it. And then you'll have all you need to calculate the density of the wood. So now I need to have a sort of a plan view sketch of how much I need to take off the front and the back. And I've already started here, but you can see I'm just hand drawing in what I think will be a nice shape, and I'm going to leave it relatively blunt up front and then taper it back from about 2/3 of the way back down to here. But I'm not going to make it super thin at the back. I want to keep it somewhat wide here, and actually that looks pretty good to me, considering it'll likely change a little bit as I take material off. And now I'm going to put a quick line to help me define how much I want to take off at the very bottom, and this pencil works out perfectly. Now if you need to shim it, you can always use some sort of thin material. You can use paper. A really nice trick is to have a deck of cards around, and then you can just sort of give yourself as many cards as you need to lift that lure up and get the contour line you want. That'll work for the bottom, but I want it a little thinner on top because I want it fat, so I'm going to shim to mark on the top. Alright, let's start carving. I think I've mentioned it before. It's difficult to really give instruction on how to carve and remove material and keep things symmetric. It really is just a matter of practice. The only tips I can tell you is to have as many contour lines as you can stand to have on there, and try to guide yourself by those. And then take your time, constantly sight down it, and use the method that you feel most comfortable with. If it's with an X-Acto knife and a little bit of sandpaper, do it. I'll be using this bench top belt sander and the disc sander that's on it. Here goes nothing. And so this is how it gets started. You can see I'm starting to contour it pretty well. All right, I think I'm pretty close, and I can do the rest with hand sanding. Let's get back in the air conditioning. One of the nice things about putting two pieces of wood together to do this kind of carving is that the grain becomes your friend. It actually helps you get that symmetry. All right, pretty happy with this shape. And the symmetry, you can see the little V right at the tail, and you can see all those little V's. Very nicely defined. So I've given this thing my final touches, and while the symmetry isn't absolutely perfect, it's pretty good. But at some point you gotta call the fight, right? Before somebody gets hurt. So now, let's put this in a vise and cut a slot. The idea is to get the angle you want, whether it's, you know, a 45 or a steeper angle, like about a 40, like that. Then make sure that you have a line crossing perpendicular to your center line up right at that point. What I like to do is set the lure up so the line that I'm going to cut is perpendicular, straight up and down, so I don't have to worry about aligning my blade. I just need to set it up straight up and down. Alright, that's got it cut. It's just a matter of making sure I got it just how I want it. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and drill out the eye socket, and at this point weighing it is kind of crucial. So let me get this drilled. So on this kind of wood, soft, kind of cruddy wood, I'm going to put the drill in reverse and sort of rub in an eye socket. This way I don't catch and I don't chip out any wood. That's pretty nice. Let's get a weight. Alright, so I know my density. I showed you the piece of wood that I already worked it out on. 0.57, and the lure blank weighs 9.5. So I'm going to divide the weight of the lure, 9.5, by the density of the wood, which is 0.57. And that gives me 16.7 grams. So that means that this lure, with all the hardware and the weights inside of it, the rattle and everything, has to weigh 16.7 grams just to be neutral, just to barely start to sink. So what I'm going to do is weigh the hooks and the hook hangers that I plan to put on this. I'll take that weight, subtract it from the total to 16.7, and that'll give me how much weight I need to add internally. 3.71. So if I add the weight of the body, the weight of the hooks, I get 13.21, and subtract that from 16.7, that gives me 3.5 grams. So now to find out how many BBs I need to put in there, I'll just tear out this little piece of wood so I can keep them from rolling around. And I'm going to drop the bib in there too, because that's going to be part of the extra weight. So it should be 3.5, and we got exactly 3.58. That's perfect. We'll use those BBs and that bib, and that will work perfectly. Next step is to split this open, and I'll drill in the cavity for the rattle. Now we got the location for the cavity set. Let's just drill a hole. Alright, so I set this little gauge at the depth I wanted, and I think I got it all the way around. I don't have to worry about it busting through the face of it. Just need to do it on the other one. So let's go ahead and dump these into this cavity. There you go. Good little rattle sound. Alright, now we need to glue it together and paint.
We'll end part one right here, but I'm going to leave you with a little sneak peek of the finished lure and a little bit of footage of it underwater. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And I'll see you all in part two. Thanks for watching.